The last blush of sunset clung to the herb beds as head chef Aldous Merrick pressed the heel of his boot into the damp soil. The kitchen garden behind the brass hound always smelled of mint, earth, and the faint sweetness of rotting apples. But tonight there was something heavier in the air, a silence that didn't belong. Aldous wiped his brow with the back of his wrist, leaving a streak of soil across his graying beard. The mound before him was fresh, too fresh, and the overturned soil reflected the fading light like a bruise. He knelt, breathing hard, as if he'd just finished a service rush rather than something far darker. His hands trembled despite years of training them into tools as precise as his knives. "I told you not to push me, Lucas," he muttered, voice cracking under the strain of guilt he refused to name. "You should have listened." A wind rustled through the lavender rows, brushing their purple heads against each other with a whispering hiss. Aldous jerked his head up, half expecting someone to be watching. But the garden was empty. It always was at this hour, one of the reasons he'd chosen it. He stood, brushing the dirt from his trousers, and forced his breath into steadier rhythm. He needed to return to the kitchen. There was still prep left for tomorrow, and a chef never left a station in disarray, no matter what crime lay cooling beneath his feet. Just before turning away, he looked once more at the mound. The weight of it seemed to press against his chest, squeezing. He hadn't meant for any of this. God, it had all spiraled so fast. The shadows deepened, the scent of basil thickened, and beneath the soil, unseen and silent, was the man who had once trusted him with every secret of the kitchen. Aldous forced himself to walk away, each step feeling like it echoed in the darkening garden. He didn't hear the faint shift of soil behind him. Not yet. He didn't sleep. Aldous Merrick lay in the narrow cot inside his office above the kitchen, staring at the water-stained ceiling as the hours dragged past in thick, suffocating silence. Outside, the night deepened into something almost viscous, a slow-moving blackness that pressed against the windows like fog. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lucas, laughing, effortless, his sleeves rolled to the elbow as he whipped egg whites into peaks that gleamed like ivory, or leaning close, too close, challenging him in that low, teasing voice, or yelling that last moment, the argument turning sharp as a cleaver. Aldous rubbed his hands together under the blanket. They still felt dirty. A soft sound rose from below, metal clinking. The kitchen was locked. He was sure he'd checked it twice. He sat up, pulse thundering. Another sound, the hollow thunk of a pot lid shifting. He swung his legs off the cot, grabbed the heavy flashlight by the door, and padded down the stairs. The kitchen should have been pitch black, but as he eased the door open, faint moonlight spilled across the prep stations through the garden-facing windows. Everything looked still, until the back door, the one that led to the herb beds, creaked. Aldous froze. The breeze that followed was cold, much colder than it should have been for late summer. It carried with it the scent of disturbed soil and wilted thyme. He stepped forward, forcing calm into his voice, though each word stuck to his throat like dough. "Who's there?" Silence. But he felt watched. He moved toward the door. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. He pushed the door open and stepped outside. The mound was there, but it wasn't the same. The soil had shifted, subtly, unmistakably. A small slump on one side. A disturbance at the base where roots of sage had been broken, as if something had pushed up from beneath. Aldous' mouth went dry. "That's impossible," he whispered. A crow perched on the garden fence cawed sharply, startling him. Its black eyes glinted in the moonlight, fixed on the mound. Then it flew off, wings thrashing the still air. Aldous stepped backward, nearly tripping on a stone. The flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled, its beam slicing through the lavender rose. He didn't pick it up. He turned and fled back into the kitchen, slamming the door and bolting it, breath ragged. Behind him, in the untouched quiet of the garden, the soil moved again. A shape uncoiled in the dimness. Half shadow, half man. Aldous stopped breathing. He couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't even think as the figure straightened, slow and trembling, like joints were remembering how to be joints again. Lucas? Aldous' voice cracked. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the figure stepped forward into a thin shaft of pantry light filtering through the flour haze. It was him, but not him. Lucas's chef whites were torn, stained with soil and dark smears Aldous didn't dare identify. Dirt clung to his hair, his cheek, his lashes, like he'd clawed his way through the earth with his face pressed to the ground. His skin, once sun-kissed and alive, looked bloodless, like cold marble dusted with grave dirt. But his eyes were the same sharp, dark brown as always, except now they held something colder beneath the surface. A steadiness that wasn't human calm, but something worse, something resolved. Aldous staggered back a step. How are you alive? Lucas's voice rasped, as if it had been dragged over stones. I'm not sure I am. He took another step. One shoe scuffed the ground, the other dragged, leaving a crooked line through the flour that made Aldous' stomach twist. You buried me. Lucas's voice was calmer now, steadier. You pushed dirt onto my chest, onto my mouth. Aldous' throat tightened. I thought you weren't breathing. You attacked me, Lucas. You grabbed me first. Lucas blinked slowly. I didn't attack you. Yes, you. Aldous' voice cracked, memories flashing like broken film. Shouting, a shove. Lucas stumbling against the herb bed border stones, his head hitting something. Blood. A rush of panic. A moment that felt like death, yet maybe wasn't. Lucas's jaw flexed. I reached for you, I was trying to steady myself, and you panicked. Aldous' breath shuddered out of him. Lucas stepped closer. I woke up in the dark, Aldous with soil in my teeth, in my nose. My lungs screamed. My nails. He lifted one hand. The tips were raw, caked with blood and dirt. I clawed until they broke. Aldous' legs gave out, and he steadied himself against the shelf. I thought you were gone. God, I didn't know. You didn't check, Lucas said softly. Aldous' vision blurred. Shame pooled thick and heavy. I was terrified. I didn't think. I just reacted. A long silence stretched. Lucas's gaze drifted around the pantry, at the flour, the potatoes, the toppled shelves, before returning to Aldous. I don't know what I am now, he murmured. I shouldn't be walking. I shouldn't be talking. But I crawled out of that garden because something in me refused to stay under your soil. Aldous opened his mouth, but Lucas cut him off. I didn't come back to hurt you, Aldous. His voice softened, strangely gentle. Not unless you make me. Relief flickered, fragile as a flame. Then Lucas's expression shifted, the gentleness evaporated. Something colder moved behind his eyes. I came back, he said, stepping close enough for Aldous to smell the earth on his breath. Because you owe me the truth, and you owe me something else. Aldous swallowed. What? Lucas's lips twitched in a smile that wasn't a smile at all. You're going to help me figure out why I didn't stay dead. Aldous felt the kitchen beyond the pantry suddenly too far away. Too normal. Too alive. And Lucas, standing before him, breathing, moving, speaking, was none of those things. Morning arrived too brightly, as if the sun had no interest in respecting grief, guilt, or the dread that had wrapped itself around Aldous' ribs like wire. The kitchen buzzed with its usual pre-opening chaos. Pots clattering, burners hissing, line cooks shouting orders at each other like soldiers in a frantic, choreographed battle. Aldous stepped onto the tile with a stiffness no one seemed to notice. He was grateful for that. Chef? Matteo, the pastry lead, raised an eyebrow. You look like you wrestled a sack of flour and lost. Aldous grunted. Didn't sleep. Too much to prep. Matteo smirked but didn't argue. It wasn't unusual for Aldous to overwork himself. Perfection had a price. Still, Aldous caught glances sliding toward him, quick and uncertain. Lucas's absence hung in the air like a misplaced seasoning, subtle but unmistakable. Anyone heard from him? Ava, the garde-manger, muttered to no one in particular as she chopped watercress. He never just ghosts. He's probably nursing a hangover, Matteo said. He drinks like a saint, cooks like a god, but can't handle tequila for shit. A few cooks laughed. Aldous forced a thin smile. But then came the sound that turned his blood to ice water. The back door creaked. The same creak. Long, slow, a hinge uneasy under weight. Aldous' knife slipped and nicked his thumb. He stared at the tiny bloom of red rising on the pad of his finger. He didn't dare turn around. Must be the breeze, Ava said, barely glancing up. But Aldous knew better. The breeze didn't carry the scent of earth, not that rich, damp smell of freshly overturned soil. It curled through the kitchen now, subtle but insistent, threading between simmering pots like a ghost drifting through steam. He forced himself to face the door. It wasn't open, but something had pressed against the frosted glass, smearing it with a dark streak. Matteo frowned. Chef, you good? Aldous walked toward the door. His shoes felt filled with lead. On the glass, the smear resolved into the shape of a handprint, fingers long, palm wide. The imprint of someone who had clawed through dirt, someone who had been buried. Aldous' breath stuttered. Behind him, Ava laughed at something Matteo said. Normal life. Ordinary sounds. As if the world hadn't shifted violently beneath Aldous' feet. He reached out and touched the glass. It was cold, so cold it burned. And then, soft as breath against his ear, he heard a voice he knew far too well. Aldous, we're not finished. Aldous stumbled back from the door, heart battering his ribs like it wanted out. The kitchen noise behind him sharpened, every clang and hiss turning suddenly hostile. He looked around, half expecting the staff to have heard that whispered accusation, but they kept working, oblivious, while the world under Aldous' feet tilted dangerously. He wiped his thumb on his apron and stepped closer to the door again. The handprint had already begun to fade, sinking into condensation like a memory dissolving in water. He pressed his ear to the glass, holding his breath. Nothing. Just the hum of the walk-in fridge, the shallow chop, chop, chop of Ava's knife, the hiss of onions hitting hot oil. But the earth scent lingered, persistent. Aldous backed away, retreating into the shadows near the spice rack, gripping the counter until his knuckles whitened. He had buried Lucas. He knew he had. He had pressed the soil down himself, tamping it like dough. There was no way. Unless he hadn't buried him deep enough, unless Lucas had still been alive. The thought sliced through him, leaving everything inside raw. Chef? Matteo's voice drifted over, softer now. Seriously, man, you good? You look like you saw a ghost. Aldous forced himself upright. Just thinking. Matteo snorted. Try doing less of that. You'll live longer. Aldous opened his mouth to reply, but a crash from the pantry cut him off. Shelves rattling, something heavy falling. Everyone turned. Ava frowned. Did someone leave the window open? That sounded like... Another crash. Not random. Something was pushing its way through the stacked crates, knocking them aside with deliberate force. Aldous stepped forward on instinct. Stay here, he ordered. Ava blinked. No? If there's a rat the size of a dog in there, you can deal with it, big guy, but I'm watching. He ignored her, each step toward the pantry thick with dread. He grabbed a pan by its handle, feeling ridiculous, but also not nearly protected enough. He reached the pantry door, put his hand on the knob. The smell hit first, soil, wet and heavy, mixed with something metallic, something faintly sweet. His stomach lurched. He opened the door. The pantry was a wreck. Flour dust hung in the air like fog. A stack of potato sacks had toppled, spilling russets across the floor. And on the back wall, across the metal shelving, were 5 deep gouges, drag marks, as though someone with broken nails had scraped down the steel until their fingers split. Aldous swallowed hard. Then he saw it. A boot print in the flour, large, narrow. Lucas's size. Something moved farther in. Just a shift of shadow, but Aldous felt it, like breath on the back of his neck. He stepped closer. "Lucas," he whispered. The lights flickered. A low creak echoed from the far end of the pantry, slow and deliberate. Like someone rising to their feet after lying still too long, Aldous tightened his grip on the pan. He wasn't alone. Aldous felt the cool metal shelving dig into his back as Lucas stepped closer, closing the last bit of space between them. There had been a time, just a week ago, when standing this near to him meant sharing tastes of sauces, testing seasoning on the same spoon, brushing shoulders during plating. But now Lucas's presence felt colder than the walk-in fridge. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Lucas asked softly. "Why didn't you call for help?" Aldous forced air into his lungs. "Because I thought you were dead. I panicked. I was afraid of what they'd think, what they'd say." "That their head chef killed his sous chef?" Lucas tilted his head. "Even if it was an accident?" Aldous winced. "I couldn't risk losing everything." "Everything?" Lucas repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "So your reputation meant more than my life?" "No," Aldous whispered. "God, no. You are like family." Lucas's expression flickered, some ancient anger warring with the faintest shade of the man Aldous knew. "Families don't bury each other in gardens, Aldous." The pantry door opened a crack. "Chef?" Ava's voice slipped in. "You okay? You've been in here a while." Aldous snapped around. "Out." His barked command startled her. The door slammed shut again. He stared at it, breathing heavily. If she'd stepped fully inside, if she'd seen Lucas like this, she'd have screamed she might have dropped dead or run for the police. "Smart," Lucas murmured. "They wouldn't know what to make of me. Hell, I don't even know what to make of me." Aldous turned back to him. "We need to get you cleaned up, get you somewhere safe, my office maybe. We'll figure out what's happening to you." Lucas's brow lifted. "So you want to hide me again?" "No," Aldous said quickly. "Not hide, protect." "Ah, a new flavor of burying. That's not fair." "Fair?" Lucas gave a harsh, humorless laugh. "I woke under 6 inches of dirt." Aldous stepped forward, hands raised, not touching him, but close, pleading. "I can't undo what happened, but I can help now. Let me help now." Lucas stared at him for a long moment. The pantry light flickered, catching the faint tremor in his jaw. "I don't know what I'm becoming, Aldous. I feel—" He searched for the word. "Wrong. Like the air is different against my skin. Like my heart forgets to beat unless I tell it to." Aldous' stomach twisted. "Then all the more reason to come upstairs. Let me look after you." Lucas's gaze softened, just for a breath. Some echo of trust glimmered there. The echo of nights they'd stay after service to taste wine and laugh at customer reviews. The echo of long, quiet moments plating dishes side by side. Then Lucas blinked, and the cold returned. "You're not doing this out of care," he said. "You're doing it to keep the truth contained." Aldous' voice cracked. "I'm doing it because I owe you everything." Lucas stepped closer until his face was inches from Aldous'. "Then prove it." Aldous swallowed. Tell me how." "Get me the knife," Lucas whispered. "The one you buried with me." The words hit Aldous like a blow. He had thrown the knife into the grave without thinking, out of horror, out of panic, out of some irrational fear that Lucas's blood on the blade would damn him further. Aldous stared at Lucas. "It's still out there under the soil." Lucas's eyes glinted. "Then we're going to dig it up." Aldous felt his pulse hammering, not from fear alone, but from the truth dawning. Whatever Lucas had become, whatever had crawled out of that garden, it needed the knife, and Aldous had no choice but to go back to the grave he had made. Aldous grabbed two things from the prep station on his way out: a trowel and the old canvas garden bag he used during harvest season. Both felt pitifully small compared to what waited for him outside. Lucas followed close behind, silent except for the faint rasp of soil still falling from his clothes. Every few steps, Aldous glanced back, as if Lucas might vanish or crumble or lunge. He did none of those things. He simply walked. The late afternoon light slanted long across the kitchen garden, casting the thyme plants into thin silhouettes. The rows were still, but the air held a different weight now, like the soil remembered what had transpired there, like it recognized its escapee. They stopped at the mound. Aldous's throat closed. The soil had settled unevenly, sunken in one area where Lucas must have clawed his way out. Lavender branches broken, sage leaves torn. A grave torn open from below. Lucas stared at it with a strange, unreadable expression. "Feels smaller from this side." Aldous swallowed. "I never meant—" "Don't," Lucas said softly. "Just dig." Aldous knelt beside the mound. The earth was still loose. Too loose. He sank the trowel in and lifted the first scoop, then another, and another. Soon he set the tool aside and used his hands instead, fingers plunging into the cool soil. Lucas crouched beside him, watching, not helping. Maybe couldn't help. His movements were still too stiff, too careful, like he was testing the edges of his own body. Aldous's hand hit metal. He froze. The knife's wooden handle protruded from the dirt like a fossil. The blade glinted faintly. He pulled it free, a shard of earth-shrouded steel that still held a dried maroon smear along the edge, Lucas's blood. When Aldous turned, Lucas was staring at the knife with an intensity that sent a chill crawling up his spine. "That was the last thing I felt," Lucas murmured. "Cold metal, then your hands on my shoulders, then—" His voice thinned, hollow. "Dark." Aldous's grip tightened around the handle. "You said you needed it. Why?" Lucas lifted his hand, the one with torn, dirt-packed nails, and touched the blade. His finger didn't bleed, though it should have. "When I woke," he whispered, "I felt something missing, something I left behind in that hole. A thread, pulled wrong. Like part of me stayed buried." He closed his fingers slowly around the flat of the blade, as if feeling for an invisible pulse. "This knife," Lucas said, "was the last thing that connected us. The last thing that severed me from whatever I was." Aldous's hands trembled. "And what are you now?" Lucas looked up. For the first time, Aldous saw fear beneath the anger. "I don't know, but I know this blade is tied to me and to you. I can feel it." Aldous offered it to him. "Take it." Lucas didn't move. "You're not afraid?" he asked quietly. Aldous shook his head, though fear churned deep inside him. "I buried you once. I won't let fear make me hurt you again." Lucas hesitated, then wrapped his hand around the handle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the earth trembled. A faint, shuddering quake rippled through the garden bed, running through the soil like a living thing. Birds erupted from the nearby tree in a frantic flutter. The lavender bent, as if something had exhaled beneath it. Lucas jerked, breath-catching. Aldous reached out. "Lucas, what's happening?" A cold wind burst across the garden, lifting dust, swirling the herbs in a violent circle. Lucas's eyes rolled back for a heartbeat, then snapped forward again. Brighter, darker, impossible. He gasped and nearly collapsed. Aldous caught his shoulders. "Lucas, talk to me!" Lucas shivered, gripping the knife like it anchored him to the world. "I remember," he whispered hoarsely. "I remember what pulled me down, and I remember what pulled me back up." Aldous stiffened. "What was it?" Lucas lifted his gaze, meeting Aldous' eyes with a clarity that chilled him. "It wasn't death that tried to claim me." His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "It was something in the soil, something old." Aldous felt the garden around them still, as if the earth itself leaned closer to listen. "And Aldous?" Lucas swallowed. "It's not done with either of us.